Okay, so welcome to the latest episode of the Reset Show. Really delighted you could join us. I'm very excited to have Glenn Templeman join us today, who is an authority on all things HR business partnering, which Katie will tell you a little bit more about Glenn in just a second. But for those of you that might be new to the Reset Show, a little bit about what it is and why we do it. So it kind of got started, I guess, at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were thinking about how we could use the opportunity of the changing world of work to really do things differently and do things better, to help our people thrive in the workplace. So that's kind of how the Reset Show was born. And we've had some amazing guests over the last, I think this is episode 32, if my memory serves. 32 odd episodes. So do check out previous episodes because there are some really brilliant speakers. But I'm really, really excited to speak to Glenn today. So Katie, tell us a bit more about Glenn.
Sure. So Glenn has a breadth and depth of HR and business partnering experience, which has been gained over a 20-year career. And when you see him in a minute, it's hard to believe it's 20 years there. About being an HR business partner across public, private, not-for-profit sectors, so all sort of different organisations. Based in London, UK, he's currently an HR consultant with the management consulting industry, working with government and public sector clients. I'm sure over the course of the next sort of 40 minutes or so, we'll be hearing about Glenn's new book, the HR Business Partner Handbook, which explains how HR business partners can be both the go-to experts needed by employees and that trusted strategic ally needed by the business. It explains all sorts of things that are just critical to people working in that industry, coined as the sort of how-to guide for HR business partners at every stage of their career. I won't give any more spoilers away. I will pass you back over to Emma and say hello to Glenn.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome, Glenn. So one of the first questions we always ask our guests is there anything that we need to know about you that wasn't included in our kind of standard bio intro? What else do we need to know about you, Glenn?
Gosh, that's a good starting question. I think that's one of the longest introductions I've ever had. So thank you, appreciate it. I was just thinking about the comment. It's actually been 22 years working in HR now. So I made the joke at a conference recently that I started, obviously joined HR at the age of 9. But actually, maybe that's the thing to know is I started when I took my first job in HR, I was just 16. So that's perhaps the one thing to know.
Wow, that's an early start in HR, isn't it? Quite unusual as well, I think, really. I know you do mention that in the book. We're going to talk about the book in a minute, but you do talk about kind of the career path and the fact that I read in the book that it's not really something that you sort of dream of being when you have that chat with your career advisor. You say, oh, actually, I'd really like to go into HR. Do you think you made that comment in the book? So, yeah. So how come you ended up going to HR at 16? Was it just kind of a happy accident?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of the funny thing, really, is I'd kind of finished school and was kind of ready to join the world of work, I guess. But I dutifully went off to college. Lasted kind of about 2 weeks, hated it, didn't want to do full-time education anymore. And as I kind of mentioned in the book, I kind of knew that the thing that I was passionate about and the thing that I was interested in was working with people. And some bright spark had connected the dots to HR or personnel or whatever it was called at the time. And so in order to kind of get out of college, you had to kind of have a plan at 16 and demonstrate that you were going to do something. So I was kind of waving the prospectus for the CIPD's certificate in personnel practice and alleging that I was going to try and do that at a neighbouring college and managed to find then an apprenticeship that was in an HR department, and kind of, I guess, the rest is history, really.
Oh, well, that's a really interesting story. I didn't realise that the apprenticeship kind of HR scheme have been going for, say, that long. That sounds awful because you're not as old as me, but you know what I mean? I thought it was more recent. That's really interesting to hear that, because I think it's always fascinating to hear people's stories about how they kind of land where they land with their careers. And there are a few people that sort of know what they want to do and follow that career path. But I think most people, it's a whole squiggly careers thing. I'm a big fan of the squiggly careers book, but it's that squiggly career thing of like, where do you end up landing, really? So, but tell us about the book. How did the book come about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, interestingly, the book kind of came about after my sort of squiggly career moment, I think, of kind of going part-time, starting a record label, thinking that I wanted to work in music and human rights, and then falling back into HR. That's the short version. So the book kind of came about because I think I'd worked at maybe 3 or 4 organizations in HR in a relatively short space of time, always in that kind of generalist and working with teams of business partners. And what I'd found over and over was that people were having the same challenges, people were stuck on the same things. And I guess that I was fortunate in my younger years to have kind of great teachers who could set me up well in HR. And so I was kind of working with a range of different business partners, to coaching and guiding people on that journey about how to kind of make this transition, like how to do the role, how to operate. Everyone knows kind of what they need to do, but kind of how to do it, and then how to start thinking about and moving into some of the strategic level operations that you need to do as a business partner. So that was just like very happy times working with some colleagues and kind of doing what I enjoy doing, really, which is trying to encourage other people. This was back in the heady days of maybe 2018, when I was commuting, 4 or 5 days a week and used to get on the train all the time. And what I'd started to do to help me think about framing these coaching sessions was write some notes in the Notes app on my phone. And sooner or later, on these lengthy commutes from London down to Gatwick, I'd written kind of 10 to 15,000 words in the Notes app in my phone, and started to realise that this was taking a bit of shape and taking a bit of form. Got it out of my phone into Word, put some structure around it, did a bit of research on who else had kind of written on this subject, and then the pandemic hit. Had lots of time in the evenings and weekends to kind of work on it. And there we go. Kind of all fell together.
Again, that's just really interesting to hear how that came about, and it sort of evolved from the coaching and, I suppose, mentoring advice you're giving, and thinking actually this could help a lot of other people. So I love that. It's a great story. Another pandemic book. There's quite a few of them around. Other people go, well, might as well write a book then. I'm gonna have to pick up on the point you made. Then I can't let this go. And Katie will be knowing exactly what I'm going to say. A record label? Tell us about a record label. What's that all about?
I was hoping you'd ask. I was hoping you would.
Oh, so I mean, that's the squiggly career thing, right? So I think come the end of 2015, I suppose a few things had kind of happened in my life. I'd had a brilliantly successful career, but I'd reached that point of thinking, what's next? I'm not sure I want to sort of go on to be a kind of HR director or head of HR. I'm still interested in the space that I'm in. How do I navigate this? And actually just wanting to explore different things. And I think it's one of the trends that we know exist, which will be a future trend around portfolio careers, what we saw at that time. Do you think back to like 2015 with the gig economy? And it was very much in that sort of time where actually I was saying, what do I really want to do? I've worked in HR at that point for, 15 odd years, 14 odd years. What do I really want to do? And actually, music's always been a passion for me. I've kind of always been involved in music in some way, shape, or form. Whether it was my first ever job working in a music store, to being a DJ, to whatever it might have been through the years. So actually, it was something that I was always interested in, wanted to kind of pursue. So we had this kind of dual track at the time of saying, actually, I'm in this kind of corporate world, but I'd like to explore something else. So I managed to find a part-time HR role to keep things ticking over, and then did a music business diploma at a college in South London, and started to build some networks, work with a few people, did a bit of artist management for people. I learned that it was a terrible idea to start a record label, and no one should ever do that. And was then promptly offered a label by one of the distribution agencies and took it. And yeah, off you go. You kind of work with people, and we had some good success. Had some tracks played on Six Music, on One Extra. I think total maybe sort of 4 or 5 million streams on Spotify.
So Colin, who have you got on your label? Because I listen to Six Music all day, so you're in good company here, because Katie and I are both massive music nerds, aren't we, Katie? But
yeah, my first job was in a music shop as well, a little record shop where I grew up. It was brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, those are the best days. I always say, like, I just used to know about dance music, and then people would come in, and as a 16-year-old, people would come in and say, oh, there's this blind opera singer, I can't think, and I was like, oh, Andrea Bocelli, yeah, I know that now. Like, stuff that you learn working in the music shops. Fantastic. Yeah, they probably haven't heard it. It's the main artist I work with is a guy called Mark Jones.
Okay.
He's a great guy. Yeah, kind of rap, hip hop type music.
That's actually ringing a bit of a bell. It's ringing a bell for me.
Played a few times on Six Music, actually.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Okay, so let's get back to the main focus of today. We're talking HR business partnering, which is what the book is all about. So I mean, you do a really great job in the book of explaining what it means to be an HR business partner. But for the uninitiated, what on earth is an HR business partner? What HRBPs used to call them back in the day. Go speak to the HRBPs. How do you describe the role of the HRBP?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, isn't it? I think how I would always describe a business partner, kind of with a sort of pictorial or a diagram in mind. So your business partner is this role or this function within the organization that actually, in my view, kind of straddles between the organization's HR function and then the business area operations. So what you're actually taking is someone who is an HR expert and they know all about how HR works, the processes, why it does what it does, and hopefully they're a people expert too, and a kind of people enthusiast. And then they shuffle along this line between HR and the organization, and they go and embed themselves in a business area, whatever that may be for that business, whether it's the IT function or the engineering function or some kind of retail front-facing customer function, and they work supporting that business area's leaders and management team with, I suppose, anything and everything that involves their people, whether that's the sort of improvement, performance, planning, development, the full spectrum of the employee life cycle.
Great, that's a really lovely way to think about it. And I mean, I for my sins, spent 10 years in house, and I've had business partner roles, and it was really hard work, because I think you almost become a bit of a victim of your own success. The better you are, the more people want of you. So did you find that, and if so, how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that's the fun part, though, because I think you often arrive working with some a new business area, and you sometimes you're really just there because they know they need to let the HR person in the room, and there's a difference between being kind of allowed in the room and sort of adding some value and earning that spot and actually becoming part of a new team. But yeah, I think definitely you can become a victim of your own success, and the workload kind of increases. And I think at that point, that's where it's so important to think about what's the best for me to do. What does adding value really mean? What does this strategic unpacking piece mean? And so where do I focus my efforts? So quite quickly, when you're successful, I think you run into a conversation of, okay, you've asked me to do all of these things from top to bottom. Actually, there's different ways to do these things at the bottom, or we could ask anyone could do these things. Where I'm going to add the most value, or where you're going to get the most benefit as a customer, essentially, is in this stuff at the top here. And so I'm going to prioritize this for you. I think those conversations are really, really common for business partners.
Yeah, definitely. And again, you go into this in the book, but what do you think makes a great business partner? What sort of skills and attributes do you need to thrive in that? Because it's a tough job. It is definitely a tough job, I think, not for everybody. So what do you need to thrive in that role?
Yeah, it is tough, and it's the full, like I say, it's the full range of human emotion that you have to deal with pretty much on an hourly, if not daily basis. I think one of the things I sort of talk about as a start point is this idea of actually having a genuine interest in people. So at a baseline, this is a human resource business partner, and what does that humanity piece mean in an organization these days? And I find that you've got more energy, enthusiasm, and sort of propulsion for delivery and for the role if you're actually genuinely interested in getting great outcomes for people, getting right outcomes for the business and its people. And so that's a big help. I think some of the other really key attributes is actually the ability to kind of problem solve is too simple, but actually kind of survey an entire landscape of people issues, let's just say, the mess that you can sometimes see, and actually be able to use some experience, some knowledge, and I think a little bit of intuition to kind of really understand what's going on and what's causing these issues, so that you can then weave together an accurate problem statement of like, okay, I see these 8 things happening, what's the root cause? And then the next big skill jump is I think kind of solution development. So understanding the services and products that the HR function offers, but also understanding what else is within the realm of possibility that you could produce and work with the HR team to produce as a solution that's going to solve these problems. So a lot of that kind of often compare it to the role of a doctor. You have to kind of see the symptoms, diagnose the condition, and then find the right treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. And you do talk about the need to be strategic as an HR business partner. So not just react to what you're being asked to do, but to kind of think bigger and more strategically. So again, just talk to us about what that looks like, and how. I think the word strategy is really scary for a lot of people, isn't it? And we have loads of debates with people and each other and clients about, is that a strategy or is it a plan? So I'd love to get your take on this whole kind of like mess of what is strategy and how can HR business partners be more strategic and not just reacting to what the business needs.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first bit of like good news that I want to give people some relief on is I would say, being strategic as a business partner is 9/10 preparatory. So actually that there's a lot of work that you do before you sort of suddenly hit this fantastic strategic utopian world. I think some of the keys for business partners. Sorry, Emma, can you ask that question again?
No, that's fine. I was just delving into this idea of being strategic as a business partner and how you go from being reactive and just giving the business what they want to thinking more strategically and delivering against the strategy, whatever that might look like. What do you need to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the really useful framings that I've used for myself and I've used with others is actually kind of thinking about it in tiers. So there's kind of a well-known model which kind of says you've got your vision is part of like the triangle at the top.
Yeah.
And from the vision flows into strategy, from strategy to policy, from policy to process. And you can kind of attach with those things that if you work it bottom up, the process is things that we do or products that we deliver. The policy is the what, and the strategy is the how. And I think that's the tool that I've used with business partners most commonly because it translates quite well into HR, right? Because we work on policies. So we understand that actually if you pick up a policy or if you write a policy and you read it and you interpret it for someone, you're at the policy level. That's the what. It's never going to be strategic level activity. So I think the big shift for business partners is taking what they're given in terms of the infrastructure within an organization, how things have always been done, and actually applying the how lens and saying, well, here's the problem, here's the context, what's the blue sky, bit of creative thinking, how could we do this differently? How could this problem be tackled? And if business partners can move into the how space and out of the what space, then I think that's usually the biggest jump for people in terms of thinking.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to think of it like that. Yeah, okay. And the other sort of well, there's lots of really great stuff in the book, but one of the chapters that really jumped out at me was the chapter on empathy, or the section on empathy. And the reason that I kind of say that is that we talk a lot about the evolution of HR, from HR to employee experience, which is kind of happening right now. And I'll give you our take on it, and it'd be great to hear your take on it. And it's fine to disagree. We love a bit of disagreement. It's all good. But I think that, you know, you were saying before about people in the world of HR and HR business partners need to actually care about people, right? And I think that's a really interesting starting point, because I think for a long time HR has forgotten about the people. It's forgotten about this. That sounds crazy, right? But if just hear me out. You know, it's all about what do we need to do for the organization, and what do we need to deliver for the work that people do, and very little time, effort, and energy spent on, and who are our customers? Our employees are our customers. What are their needs and motivations? How are they feeling? What's going on for them? Yeah, they might run an annual survey, very kind of, you know, transactional, but they don't really spend much time really genuinely understanding who it is they're designing experiences for, or designing policies for, whatever it is. So I'm really passionate about the world of empathy. And we talk about, you know, the big change on employee experience is actually saying we need to really get to know our people. It's just such an irony, isn't it, that we work in people functions, but we don't really know the people that well. So it's great to see that you've got a chapter on empathy. But yeah, just love your thoughts on that, you know, whether you agree, disagree, and really what's the role of empathy when it comes to the HR business partnering role?
Yeah, sure. I think on employee experience, it's more important than ever. And the reason I say that is because, and I've got that sort of lived experience of the age discrimination legislation coming in like 2006, the idea that retirement ages were removed, but that's a long time ago now. So yeah. Where we are now is we have this enormous spectrum and enormous spread of ages and generations that make up our workforce. And if hybrid working has taught us anything, there's no way that they all want the same thing. So I think that's really important to, from an employee experience perspective, to really be able to understand, you know, who is in our workforce. Is it possible to segment them, and actually what do they want, and how do we serve the different kind of wants and needs that come from the workforce? And one of the things I quite enjoy talking about with that is our consumer experience as well. So how does our interaction with organizations like Uber and Amazon and even, you know, ASOS, if we use that for clothes, our expectations of how we're served as consumers affect our expectations of what we're going to get in the workplace and absolutely as well. I think some of that stuff's really, really fascinating. So I suppose I'm agreeing with you, Emma. I think.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's really interesting. You brought out the consumer experience, because something that we talk about a lot is that, you know, when I first started work many years ago, back in the 90s, there was a gap between experience outside of work and inside of work, but it wasn't huge. Whereas now the gap is enormous. You think, I mean, I joke, but it's not actually even a joke, that there's many people that we work with, clients we work with, who can't even definitively tell me or tell us who works in an organization. They don't even have a clear view of like this, as they sit and stand today. They couldn't say these are the people who've got working for us, let alone what they're all about. And yet you think about, as you say, the experience that we have outside of work, where, you know, talk about music, and, you know, Spotify, listened to my rewind playlist this morning, you know, and it's spot on with knowing what I'm going to want to listen to at certain times of the day. And I just think, I thought a few weeks ago, oh, you know, weather's getting nice, and suddenly there's this kind of, here's your summer playlist, and it's spot on. It's just scary how well it knows me. And I think a few years ago, the algorithms and the kind of AI was a bit clunky, and I guess all sorts of weird random ads in my Facebook feed that probably show my age again, Facebook, that probably weren't really spot on. And now they're pretty good, you know, and Netflix knows what I want to watch, and Amazon knows what I want to buy. Yeah, the experience we have inside an organization is, I can't get my laptop to work, I can't find anything on the internet. You know, it's a million miles away, isn't it? And I think that does create a lot of dissatisfaction and disengagement. So
yeah, and it's expectation based, right? And especially you think about the you know, Gen Z and below kind of just are arriving with these expectations that the workplace is going to be the same, and that it's not going to be kind of outdated. So lots of work to do. I think on the empathy for business partner piece and that transition, I kind of count myself lucky that, I guess, where I joined in the HR profession in 2001, there was still some old world thinking, and there's been lots of new world thinking since, right? So, but one of the things I always brought with me was this idea that If an employee within the business wants to speak to HR, then that's an absolute right, and we should always let them do that. And I think what we've trended towards, especially in that business partner place, is evidence-based decision making, how we use data, improving our experience of analytics, financial literacy. I talk about now being a financial custodian. There's all these kind of extra things, but I would very much say that there's a whole layer of like the human piece, the humanity piece, which is still really important, especially when it comes to understanding what's going on in the workforce and kind of predicting, preempting and preventing things that are going to come from new initiatives and changes. And of course, this has come back into the spotlight in the last couple of years with everything that we've seen outside the workplace, whether it's racism, the safety of women, war in Europe, all of these kind of macro events that our workforce is saying, what's our response to this? What's our leaders' response? And business partners, I think, have been asked by their leaders, what should we say? What should we be doing about this? And that's the ultimate kind of empathy piece, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It all makes complete sense. Katie, have you got any questions you'd like to jump in with?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it slightly around COVID. I'd just be really interested to see sort of the biggest changes that you've seen in that role since the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a good question, Katie. I think I used to joke, because I like to joke, but it's not a joke, that basically 90% of my role is done in corridors and on the side of a desk. And I think that's true for a lot of business partners. You can produce nice papers and long emails, but actually so much of it's done in a conversation or catching the right person at the right time. And I know for myself and from talking to others, I think that's been a big challenge. We talk about now the barcode diary. So you've got in your diary all these 15 and 30-minute Teams meetings now, where before you would used to just sort of bump into someone in the canteen or have a conversation and get through. So I think that again, that kind of human kind of interaction, the influence side, I think is probably harder for a lot of people. You getting more focused time, but obviously you've got to try and get into people's diaries. I would say though, what I'm just seeing more recently is much more of a return to the office personally. My train was full at 8:15 the other morning. I can't get a desk in the office, so I think some of that stuff is kind of coming back, which I think is positive for some of these conversations.
And do you think there's anything sort of taken from that last crazy couple of years that you really hope that we keep, that has been a positive?
Yeah, I think there must be loads. I've just probably embedded them and started doing them already. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I think I might have to take that away and think about that one, Katie.
I think maybe the empathy piece in itself. I think it's probably certainly the conversations we've had. I would say it is a bigger topic of conversation now. I think people are starting to realize actually we need to think about how people feel. And I think that probably stemmed initially from the mental health point of view as a result of the pandemic. But I think people realize actually when we talk to our people, we find out some really useful information as well. So
yeah, I think you're right, actually, because some of I can certainly say for myself, I didn't know what a check-in was, or I'd certainly never done one before pandemic. And then they became more commonplace, really useful. Where I work, we have a tool that we call the Manual of Me, where we kind of set out what's important to us and things about us and the way that we work and the way that we live, and share that with our teams that we work with. And those have all been, pandemic things and to support our well-being as well. So yeah, I knew there were some good things, I just couldn't quite recall.
It almost feels like a long time ago and yet still so fresh, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's funny what you're saying about the travel piece. I mean, I feel like I've traveled more the last month than I have in the last 2 years. I've literally been all over last sort of 6 weeks. There's been a lot of travel again. It's almost back up to not quite, I'd say, but almost back up to pre-pandemic levels of travel, because I've always traveled a lot with the job that I do and the jobs that we do. So and it was nice not to have to travel. But I think there's costs and benefits with any way of working, right? There isn't a kind of, you can't have it all. I think with hybrid, there are always going to be some sacrifices. So yes, not having to commute is amazing, but you miss bumping into your colleagues. And like you say, those I hate the word water cooler moment, the sentence water cooler moments, but those corridor conversations that you alluded to, we miss those. And I mean, we've been working with one team virtually since we started working with them, and they're all over the place, I won't say where they are, and sometimes it's been quite hard. It's a transformational project, and it's been quite difficult sometimes to make progress. And a couple of days in a room with them a few weeks ago, we made more progress in those 2 days than we had in probably 6 months, just because we were in a room where we could see the whites of each other's eyes, and people couldn't turn off the cameras or zone out. We had to get stuff sorted, and the connections we made were just brilliant. So it's a difficult one, I think, to solve, really, and we're not anywhere near it yet.
Yeah, what's your take on that, Glenn? I mean, what sort of things have you had to do to kind of fill that void for those little subtleties that you might pick up at a coffee machine or such, like when people across the business, your stakeholders, sort of saying, what's the mood of the nation? How are people thinking and feeling? How are you kind of filling that void?
Well, I think some of the things that I try and do is to, it sounds really obvious, but to kind of proactively be connected. I have kind of sort of little checks for myself if I've gone maybe a week without talking to a number of people. I'm thinking, okay, hang on, it's Friday now, let me just check in. And I think having to hardwire this stuff in that before it's just there, right? Because it's like, oh, I need to go and grab a coffee. Oh, I bumped into them. Now it's got to be planned. It's got to be intentional. And I think, when you live life on Teams or Zoom, you don't bump into people. It just doesn't happen like that. So I've definitely hardwired some of that stuff. And having changed employers during the pandemic as well, one of the things that I'm still doing now is making sure that I again don't go more than a fortnight without meeting someone new, and I'm trying quite hard proactively to make sure I do that, and I get those kind of 15-20 minute Teams, Zoom coffee chats in the diary every couple of weeks to keep things moving and keep things current, essentially.
Yeah, no, it's a really good tip. It's just kind of, like I say, hardwiring it into your day to day, isn't it? It's easy to kind of not to do that. Suddenly realize you've not spoken to someone for like weeks on end. So yeah, absolutely. And what about the future then? I know you do kind of touch on that in the book, but I know that you also kind of speak on the subject around kind of future trends. So what are your thoughts on what are going to be the big themes over the next few years for HR and for business partners? What we're going to be dealing with, what we're going to be working on? What are you excited about, maybe?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that we see quite a bit outside of HR is a move to product-based working or product-based operating models. And I should have just started by saying I find this quite tough to kind of reimagine what the business partner role is going to be like, probably because I've been in it for more than 20 years, and it's quite difficult to blue sky something if you've been plodding along with for quite a long time. So I have thoughts around how the role can evolve, but I think the biggest kind of revolution is probably an operating model switch. So yeah, one of the things that I've thought about quite a bit and that we talk about with our clients is an HR product-based operating model. So rather than having the traditional kind of I'll call them silos, but of perhaps centers of expertise, business partners, men, ops, shared services, leadership, whatever it is, and actually you kind of reimagine the approach to the HR function. So and first, I think it's easier to do in portfolios. So you say, well, actually, we're going to break those old structures that we had, and instead we'll start off with the join portfolio. So we'll have an organization within HR that's responsible for attraction, EVP, all of the recruitment piece, the onboarding, and the first kind of 6 months of someone's journey. And actually within that, you could be a reward expert, you could be a talent acquisition practitioner, you could be an HR business partner. There are many skills. You could be talent and learning, and you cut the department differently because actually you're organising around portfolios. And obviously when you run this at scale, you could actually be organising around individual digital or experiential products. So I think that's something for us to think about. And you know, it's not complete pie in the sky. I mean, many kind of IT organisations already moved to product-based working, and so I think, you know, it's good for us to consider what could that mean for HR essentially, and how could that revolutionise the business partner role and other roles as well.
Interesting. That's a really, I've never really thought of it in that way. It's really interesting to kind of just mull over that for a minute, I think. And that, I guess that kind of fits with the sort of the life cycle approach that a lot of HR teams are moving to in the wake of employee experience. I mean, we think it's much broader than that. That's just one part of it, but that would kind of make sense. Although, yeah, I think there's never going to be a perfect solution, is there really? And I think you talk about this a lot in the book about, you know, it really comes down to relationships and the ability to build those relationships. I think you're absolutely right. Whatever model you're operating under, it's really about the connections you make with other people. So I think that's a very good and valid point that you make there. So, okay, I think we're almost at time. Katie, have you got any final questions for Glenn before we finish up?
Yeah, last question, I think, if I may. So I'm just coming back to the fact that you've had this long career in this industry, and I'm just kind of really interested to know, in all those years, those 22 years, what would you say has been your biggest learning? So someone maybe coming into the industry, what's the one thing you'd be like, right, don't make these mistakes, or this is one thing I picked up really early on that's really helped me?
Gosh, Katie, these are fantastic questions. I feel like I need to give you a written answer to that. I think there's so many things. I think the biggest kind of because it's slightly controversial. So I think the biggest one is probably learning when to say no and what to say no to. But if you kind of invert that question, it's knowing what you're doing and why it's adding value. So I think that's the biggest learning. If you know what you're there for, and you've got a really great sense of your purpose and your role and why you're doing what you're doing, then it's easy to be able to say no to the wrong things. And that's the second one, actually, is make sure you understand why something happens. Don't just do things because they've always been done that way. Yeah. Learn why. I
think that's a great answer. I think any kind of sort of business partner role, whether it's a HR business partner or an internal comms business partner, it is about understanding, you know, what your role is and where you add value. So sometimes you might be given a steer and, you know, deep down it's the wrong one, and it's being able to sort of state the case, isn't it, as well? So yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you for that, Glenn. That's a really great piece of advice, I think to end on. And it's something that you know, when you're passionate about what you do, it's sometimes hard to say no, but you're absolutely right. If you're going to add value, you've got to learn when to say no. So thank you for that. It's been lovely to have you on the show. Some great advice for, well, anyone working in HR, not just HR business partners, but I think, you know, if you are in the HR business partner role, invaluable advice and brilliant books. So go out, get the book published on Kogan Page. It was out this year, right? Did it come out this year?
Came out in December last year.
Last year. Right. Okay. So that was a big celebration at Christmas for you then when that came out.
It was. Brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And you know, have a great weekend. And hopefully we'll catch up sometime soon.
You too. Brilliant. Thank you both.